Starting August 1st, a new law aimed at stopping AI-generated fake nude images takes effect. The law bans websites and apps from allowing users to create nudified images without consent, and violators could face civil penalties of up to $500,000. Joining me now to talk about this topic is Victoria Pickering from the Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Violence. Victoria, thanks so much for joining the show.
Thank you for having me, Courtney.
So walk me through this law. What is this new law taking effect and what will it do?
Yeah, so the law that goes into effect on August 1 will it will act in addition to existing state law that criminalize this type of technology-based abuse, and it will actually make it illegal for folks to develop this sort of software and make it available to folks here in Minnesota. So this criminalizes not only the distribution of these sorts of what are called, AI nudification or deepfake nudes, but it actually says you can't develop or advertise or offer a product or a service that allows people to do this here in the state of Minnesota.
Okay, so how easy is it to create one of these AI images?
Unfortunately, reports show that it is quite easy for people who are wanting to engage in this type of harm to access the technology they need to do so quickly and easily. We've seen multiple instances of programs being advertised openly online, on social media. We've seen instances of young people and children having access to this technology. So unfortunately, while it is illegal to create AI images of people without their consent and to distribute those, it is unfortunately very easy for people to get access to the technology to do these sorts of things.
So scary. What led lawmakers to actually want to act on this? Was there a specific case that drew their attention to this issue?
So I want to give credit where credit is due, that there were some very hardworking advocates, very hardworking lawmakers who made this happen, and that there were also a lot of victims and survivors at the center of this. And so the people who have been impacted and harmed by this sort of technology facilitated abuse in the past have bravely come out and spoken about those experiences and advocated on their own behalf and on behalf of other victims and survivors in the state, and worked closely with lawmakers to ensure that something like this passes and goes into effect.
Who are most commonly victimized by this trend of nudifying photos? Are we talking children, teens, adults?
Yeah, so there's not a lot of research on the exact demographics of the victims, but what's really interesting is the CDC regularly does research on victimization, specifically sexual violence and intimate partner violence. And so they're one of the main sources of information about this type of harm. And for the first time ever in the last report that they put out on this topic, they actually included questions and data about technology-based abuses. And so they broke it down by gender of victims, and I'll just share the most recent data with you on that. So technology facilitated sexual violence, and that's defined as any unwanted sexual experiences involving technology, including unwanted sexually explicit messages or images without the person's consent. The research showed that 10% of adult women and 7% of adult men experienced that in the last 12 months.
Wow.
So we're talking significant numbers of folks. I would also like to point out that this is based on people self-identifying that they've gone through this. And we know one of the scariest things about this type of harm is that often victim survivors don't know about it right away. So this is done without their consent, often without their knowledge, and they may not find out until days, weeks, or years later when those images surface or when somebody notifies them about the images.
So I'm curious, does this law put anything in place to stop the software from actually creating the images. Obviously, there's penalties in place if an individual makes these images, but what about, like, I'm thinking, you know, the major artificial intelligence companies? Is there any onus on those companies to make sure that these images can't be made?
Yes, so that's exactly what this law is focused on. It's letting companies know that it's actually their responsibility if the technology they develop can be used in this way. So there are lots of companies that have said that they have banned this type of technology from their platforms, although we do know that studies show that they're still widely available even on those platforms that have banned them. But this says you are responsible if your technology is used in this way. You're responsible if it's advertised for this purpose, or if you're selling other forms of technology on your website that allow people to do this. And then it also creates with it civil responsibilities for that. So the Attorney General's office can actually fine companies up to $500,000 per violation of this law if their technology is being used in this way, if they don't stop it from being used in this way. And then it also allows the victims in these cases to additionally sue those companies for this violation of law as well.
How hard is it for law enforcement to prove that an image was AI generated? I mean, this technology has become so good.
Yeah.
How do these law enforcement agencies who are now tasked with enforcing this law, how will they be able to determine that the images are fake?
Yeah, so I definitely don't want to ever present myself as an expert on AI technology because I'm not. But I will say, you know, part of this is that it's not just a criminal act to create these types of images, but it's also something that can result in civil penalties as well. And that's the focus of this particular law. So it may not always be law enforcement. Folks may have to engage other experts on these topics. But we do know that law enforcement are trying to keep up with the new technology. Unfortunately, we know that where new technology is developed, people find a way to cause harm with that technology. And so we, you know, are really supporting folks in making sure that they have adequate training on these topics. But also, I know here in Minnesota, the BCA has folks who specialize in technology forms of abuse. And so I would encourage local law enforcement agencies, if they're curious about what resources are available for them related to these types of cases, to reach out to the BCA and find out what's available through them.
You know, when I think about kids and teens who are dealing with this, is there any advice you can give to parents who, you know, want to talk to their kids about this?
Absolutely. So as young people are engaging with technology at unprecedented levels, I think it's just as important for parents to be talking to their children about technology facilitated abuse, things like sexual coercion online, AI nudification, threats to disseminate images, whether those are actual images or deepfake images, in the same way that we should be talking to young people about bodily autonomy and consent. We should be talking to them about it in this technology-based context. The biggest bit of advice I have to parents is try your absolute hardest to not engage in this in a way that makes young people feel ashamed. Let them know that if somebody creates an image of their body or someone releases an image of their body, that is not their fault. They didn't do anything wrong that caused it. And there are people who can support them and help them through the process of healing in the aftermath. I would always encourage young people to know that there are local advocates, sexual assault centers, child advocacy centers in their communities that can support them and their families if something like this happens to them. And there are also professionals who they can get connected with, who there are laws in place that help people get these images taken down if they're posted online.
Do you see this law changing behavior, or is this more recourse for victims?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that the recourse is really, really important. We talk about accountability as one of those key pillars in the work that we're trying to do to address sexual violence and other forms of violence in our communities. So it's not just about making sure that victim survivors have the access to healing and that they need, but also that we hold folks accountable who contribute to these types of harm. And I also, when you ask about, is it preventative in nature, essentially? I mean, I hope so. I hope that technology companies and corporations that are engaged in this space take this seriously and recognize that the state just made it very clear and that this is not allowed here in Minnesota, and that there will be consequences if folks are marketing and developing technology or offering services that allow people to conduct this type of harm.
So terrifying, just horrible. Feel so bad for the victims that have been through this. Victoria Pickering, thank you so much for joining the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.